Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we're back on the Alfarrari and continuing to fit up body panels. Okay, so those of you who were watching last week will have seen that I was showing you through how mangled this B-pillar was. It's obviously had an accident before. It's been cut and welded back into place, just sort of slapped back together. I was going to cut this out and weld the new one on, but what I'm thinking is basically the best way to go ahead is to move forward with known points that at least lined up the way the car was before. I mean, obviously the car is all over the place and now I've cut everything off. I need to have reference points to try and make everything match up again. So at this stage, I'm going to leave this B-pillar, even though it's swinging, it's not actually connected here, it's completely rusted through. I'm going to leave it here so I can put the door latch on and line the door up and basically go through and line up all of the external panels on the car so that I have everything sort of tacked into place. I'll just basically clamp it into place to start with, just to make sure that everything lines up the way I need to before I even think about welding anything. So moving forward, it's a bit of sort of trial fitting. First things I've got to do is trim off these excess bits of old rear quarters off of this B-pillar so that I can put the new one on, and then gradually go through, clear this lip off, and then start trial fitting some of the parts just to see where we're at. So after a bit of messing around, you can actually see that this is all coming back together nicely. So it is really great being able to get these complete restoration panels from Classic Alpha. It's actually, you know, a really nice original fitment panel, and it's starting to look a bit like an Alpha again, which is a good thing. So moving forward, I need to move back onto the door, get the door mounted again. But before I do that, I want to mount the door rubbers, because that's going to affect how the door closes, and I want everything to line up the way it's going to when it's finally finished and painted. Okay, so moving forward, the next thing I need to do to make sure that the door fits properly and all the lines properly is I need to get the rubber in, at least in the forward edge of the door. According to Tim, the back edge, there's a more adjustment. It's not as big of a deal, but the forward edge and this bottom lip is what is really important. And I've got the new rubber here, but the rubber on this car, instead of like some of the other cars, a lot of modern cars just clip over this edge, which would probably make it a lot easier. But these old cars actually have this channel. So I bought a whole bunch of the new channels through Classic Alpha again. They rivet on inside this edge of the door all the way around the door, and the rubber clips into it. Now, before I do that, I've just seen I've got a little bit of a patch to do here, so I'm going to patch that first, and then we're going to start trying to fit this up. I'm going to rivet it in probably to start with, just because it'll hold it, but it is going to be removed again. It's going to be a lot of adjustment and playing with things to get this sill in the right spot, to get this lower mounting plate in. This needs to go on, and the rubber mounts into the bottom here, and also getting these trims in. So let's get into that. Okay, so I've gone through, I've cleaned up most of these weld-on spots, and I've just noticed I've got another big patch of rust here, well, small patch of rust I should say, on the inner frame rail here, so I'm just going to cut this out and weld this in. Another quick patch and we can move forward. All right, I'm much happier with that TIG weld. It's much easier welding the thicker stuff. That was a nice tight section. I've been practicing a lot with the TIG off of camera, just in my, when I get a spare second, and just cutting little strips of sheet metal and just welding them together, just to try and get my MIG welding better. The thin stuff is a lot harder, obviously, like all welding. The thicker stuff is much easier to get a good weld on. This 1.6mm plate, much easier to get a good bead on. I'm still struggling, particularly those little patches, trying to weld in those. Getting my settings right, I think, is probably part of it. I've got on this, I'm running about 45 amps at the max, and I've got the pedal now, and I'm practicing with the pedal. So I am getting much more proficient with the welding and enjoying learning how to do it. But as you saw with the other A-pillar patch I just did, once I blew a couple of holes, I just switched back to the MIG. I'm quite confident with the MIG. I could do the whole thing with the MIG and do it quite well, but I really want to get better with my TIG welding, and these patches are a good place to practice. So, all right, grind that back and go back to fitting up my bits and pieces. I will hopefully get to putting those rubbers in. So the rear quarter is currently just being held on by a couple of vice grips, and the lower sill is not is basically the same. But you can see here that the door is really tight here, a little bit looser at the top, but it's also sitting a little bit high, and you can tell that by the sill. Now the sill, I think, needs to come up on this end, but as it goes forward to the front of the door, the panel gap is quite reasonable. But also you can see by the door here that it is it's sort of loose here and then comes up to tighter at the top of the door. So next step is to refit the latches, so then I can close the door and see if I can mess with the alignment. So I've come to a stopping point. One of the most annoying things about buying a car that comes in a bunch of boxes is you don't really know what you got. And unfortunately, I've got all the internal door mechanism, but I don't actually have the latch part that bolts to the car. So I'm gonna have to track that down. It's just one of these annoying things that I'm going to struggle and come across as I move forward on this project, is trying to find all the bits. So, in any rate, that is where I can have to stop there on this alignment process. All right, so I just went through here and I added a second shim to the top of the door. And this panel gap is much nicer now. It's reasonably even the whole way down. When the door is closed, it is probably a little bit too wide. It's hard to hold the door closed and show you the width. If it was like it is here, it would be fine, but when the door is pushed fully closed, it's about another millimetre wider, which is a bit wide. Also, the line of the sill is a lot better. It's still a little bit too wide on this end, but it has brought the door down slightly, and the rear quarter panel is still a bit too tight, but that can be adjusted later. In any case, that is all I'm going to get done for the day. The door is mounted on and it's not too bad. I'm going to have to see if I can track down a body side door latch for the passenger side, and also chase down some of the other little bits and pieces I need. That's all the tinkering I can do, so that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, following its 1947 win at the Mille Miglia, Alfa Romeo knew it had to do something to replace its 8C 2900 to remain competitive with the ever-improving Ferrari and Cisitalia. They didn't have the resources to build a new car from the ground up, so they came up with the 6C 2500. They started with the shorter 8C frame, and then they cut it off in front of the rear wheels, and then they shortened it by a further 10 inches. So this, along with drilling out the cross members, helped to save weight. It was powered by Alfa's 2.4 litre double overhead cam straight six, fed by triple Weber carburetors, and it was said to have an output of 145 horsepower and to reach top speeds of 200 km an hour. Only 3 were built, and although 2 of them were entered in the 1948 Mille Miglia, neither of them actually finished. The following year, in 1949, a privateer named Franco Roll drove one of these 6C competizioni and took out second place in the Targa Florio. He then went on to win first place in this class and third place overall in the Mille Miglia. That car is the only surviving one of the 3, and it sold last year at auction for US $3.5 million.
All right, that is it for another week. Slow progress on getting these body panels on, and yeah, not having some of the bits makes it difficult, but I'm slowly getting things aligned. It's going to be a matter of just moving around the car and getting all the panels on so that I can line everything up before I weld anything, and then hopefully we'll have a car. I'm really looking forward to doing the engine bit, but I've got to get the car bit right first.
I like how one of the viewers suggested that a good name for a new t-shirt line would be something along the lines of, "This took longer than expected."
That's not a bad idea. So as you can see, I'm wearing my UrgeFab merch. Support the channels that you enjoy. We've got links to our merch in the description.
And if you'd like to see the videos a day early, you can join us on Patreon.
Patreon,
sorry.
And join on Facebook as well. Yeah. And Instagram. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
I can't remember all this. Competizioni to a... Just took everything out of me saying that. I think I'm surprised equally, as are you.